Alright class, so this is going to be your wheel throwing demo for mugs. And this part of the demo I'm just showing how to form a pot. So basically how to make a cylinder and then form it from there, so that later on you can add handle, you can trim it, and then add a handle, and then have a finished piece. So I'm actually not starting with that much clay here. We're using less than we do for our cylinder because you don't really need that much for a mug. I would say about a pound is perfect, or less sometimes. It just depends on what you're trying to make, but even with a pound you can make a pretty big mug. So I'm going back to my centering techniques and getting this nice and centered. The way that you do so, make sure it's nice and centered, looks correct before you dive in. Then you can make the hole in the center. Make sure when you're doing this you're leaving plenty of clay at the bottom, because you're going to actually end up trimming that out this time. Now I pull my clay towards me and open that up a bit for my base. Try to create that 90-degree angle so I don't have a bunch of extra clay at the base. And then I'm using a sponge. Clean that up while I have the chance. Get this nice and parallel with each other before I make some poles. Now I can pull up and really build up my height. And what I do is basically make this look like a cylinder. I gain my height first and then I form last. So you're really focusing on all those things we worked on in the cylinder project. Nice, consistent, even walls. Not too thick, not too thin. Nice clean lip at the top. Refinements on the inside and outside. Make sure it's nice consistency, not leaving too much clay at the bottom. And before I form, I'm just going to color this in a bit, gain my height. Maybe do one more pull. Make sure that looks really nice and clean the way you want it to, because once you form, you want to let go of it pretty quick. You want to get rid of it, or not get rid of it, but not mess with it too long after you're done forming. So forming is really simple. You want to make sure your hand's wet so it glides nicely over the pot. But what I generally like to do in most mugs, they have some sort of belly. So on the inside I'm just lightly pressing, I'm supporting it on the outside here with the sponge, creating that belly. And then I like to flare it out a little more at the top, and that's a very common mug shape that you see, because it holds nice volume, it's easy to drink out of, and it looks nice too. So it's a basic form, but you can make it any form you want. We're just trying to make them similar to each other, just something that you can do multiple times. Before I'm really done with this, I need to clean it up a little more. Create a 45-degree angle for myself at the bottom, so it's nice and easy to cut off when I'm done. And for myself, when I go to trim, it's nice and easy to clean up. Okay. If your rim is not even, this is a good chance for you too to cut that off and make sure that's nice and flat, because you're going to end up flipping this upside down. So you want that to be as flat as possible. Mine's pretty good, but yours in that case, you might need to just cut that off really quick and create it. Ends up being easier for yourself at the end. So from here, I'm just going to cut this off for myself. Maybe put a little water under it. Cut again. And I'm going to let this dry for a couple days, where I can let it get to a leather hardness where it's easy for me to trim and add a handle, and I'll do those both at the same time in the next demo. Alrighty, so for the next part of my mug demo, I need to flip it upside down and trim away some of this clay at the bottom. So I get rid of it, I can continue to shape my form a little bit and really finish this to make it look nice. So the tool I always use to get started is a pencil, and I measure the width of it. So to get this centered upside down, I need another circle to know that width. So that's what I use the pencil for, is to figure out what that width is. And then if you just get that pot centered around that circle, it almost always, as long as your pot is centered itself, it almost always can get centered pretty easily that way. We're just going to clean up the bottom using the larger loop tool and create a 45-degree angle on this. So it doesn't need to be perfect, but the closer to the center, the better. From here, I just used 3 dollops of clay to get this stuck to the wheel so it doesn't go anywhere. I've seen that happen multiple times where we don't get this stuck to the wheel good enough. Maybe you get the wheel going too fast and it goes flying. So, and that's a good way to ruin your pot. So we're just doing this to get it secure. And then this is your large loop tool that we're using to do a couple things. Number one is trimming away this extra clay on the sides. And I can continually shape the form a little bit by rounding it out at the base here. And if you're working with this at the right time, when it's really leather hard and nice and easy, you can have a lot of control over it and clean it really nice. The next thing is just cleaning up the base, getting that really flat so it sits nicely on a table. And then lastly, I'm just putting a 45-degree angle at the base here so I can wax that pot up to that point. It's starting to come up a little bit, so just go stuck again. Pressing down always helps too. Create that 45-degree base. Maybe clean up the bottom a little more. 45-degree angle. And that way you have a nice, clean bottom to work with. So it's flat here, it's a 45 angle here, and now it's a little more formed and rounded too. So that's what we're looking for when it comes to trimming the bottom of a mug for yourself to now put a handle on, and that's what we'll be doing next. Alright guys, so this is our last step of our mug demo, and it's just adding a handle. And at this point you should have already thrown it, you should have already trimmed it, and now you need to just add a handle to finish it. So you need about a pound of clay or less probably, and I kind of get into a coil look in shape, and I get the top a little bit bigger than the bottom, and then I also make sure I have a bucket of water underneath me when I'm throwing this. And all it is you're pulling the clay downwards in a fashion like this, and use your fingers and then also like the shape of your hand to your advantage to make a nice clean looking handle. Whenever it gets too thin, you can pinch it off, and you don't really need this much clay, but you can make multiple handles with one. And you should never keep your first handle. You should practice a few, especially if you're just starting, and pick the one, pick a bunch to choose from, but pick the one that looks best and kind of fits the shape and style of your mug the best. So just kind of using angles of my hand and my fingers to create a nice shape that'll look good on my pot. And when I like that, I'll either come over to this wire tool on the wedging table or just cut it off with a knife tool or something, and I'll shape it onto the table like that. And if you're smart about this, you'll let this kind of sit for like 5 or 10 minutes and let it set up a bit so it's nice and dry for you to work with. The wetter it is, the harder it is to put on to the pot, especially if you're working with a dry pot. You don't want to put a wet handle on a dry pot or vice versa. They should try to be similar kind of feels. But I'm going to go for it anyway, and as long as you're clean with it, you should be fine. And what I do is I grab a fettling knife and I cut away from me, or kind of at a 45-degree angle away, so it kind of sits up on that pot nice. And before I commit to anything, I practice where that's going to go. And I see if I like it, see if it's going to work. Is it long enough? And from what I can tell, it is. So it's not stuck to anything, so I make some marks where I need to slip and score. Nicely take that off for a second, let it sit. And you should have a scoring tool next to you. Something that you can really slip and score onto the bottom of this pot. Should have some slip nearby to add so that it really sticks. This is the glue, keeps the handle together to the pot. I want to make sure it's attached nice and clean, and you should really do that to both sides as always. And then when you put this on, you kind of snug it on, get it stuck nicely. I like to get that top part on really clean first, so it's nice and attached. And then I can decide how do I want that handle to look from there. Always center it from the back. Get that bottom attached. Clean up that base and get that clay attached to the bottom. And then you can always go in and kind of reshape this a little bit too if you want. It's still wet enough. You can even kind of make it wider if you need. Make sure you can fit a couple fingers in there, and then it's going to be nice and comfortable to hold. Should look something like this, where you feel like it's not like awkwardly shaped on the side of the pot. It actually adds to the shape of the pot. So you might need to do some cleaning up, or just grab a small sponge, get rid of some of these fingerprint marks or any marks that you don't like on it. But let it just kind of set up for a bit and finish it off, and it should look something like this. So now you have a nice formed mug, you have a nice clean bottom, and you have a handle added to it all, so you can go and use it later. And yeah, don't touch this handle at all, or hold it, pick it up by the handle until it's been fired at least once, and then you should have a nice finished and functional product. Thanks guys, good luck, let me know if you need help.